Hi everybody, welcome back to another Writing in the Dark video. I'm Tim Wagner, author of 50 novels, about half horror and dark fantasy, half media tie-in, winner of 3 Bram Stoker Awards, been teaching creative writing for 30 years. I'm also the author of Writing in the Dark and the Writing in the Dark workbook, if you want some instruction on how to improve your horror writing. The latest novel that's out from Flame Tree Press. It's called We Will Rise. It's about a ghost apocalypse. Ghosts show up all over the world and start attacking their loved ones and friends for reasons unknown. So it was a lot of fun to write. Hope you check it out. So today what I want to talk about is something that I did in We Will Rise. And it's something I really believe in a lot, which is that you need to give characters their dignity before you kill them. This can apply to any kind of genre where you have characters that are just going to die. It could be a mystery, could be suspense, could be thriller, could be fantasy, maybe not romance, unless it's like thriller or suspense romance. But definitely it happens in horror. So let's talk a little bit about why it's important to give characters their dignity before they die. Then I'm going to tell you some ways to do it. So one of the things you want to avoid in horror is you don't want your characters to be empty ciphers that exist like just people you mow down in a video game. They're nothing. They're not even people in the reader's eyes at that point. You want readers to care about your characters because if the readers care about them, they care what happens to them. And that's how you create suspense. It's how you raise the stakes for the story. If there are other people that die who aren't the main character, that raises the stakes for your main character, especially if some of those supporting characters were near and dear to the main character. It's how you increase the reader's investment in the main character's fate, or characters if you have a few main ones, because all the other ones who die just raise the threat level for your heroes. It's also how you strengthen readers' empathy, and this is a big thing that fiction can do. Lots of studies talk about how people who read fiction are more empathetic, but one of the criticisms of horror, maybe you see this more in films than in fiction, written fiction, but one of the criticisms is that readers, audience members, whatever, they just delight in the death of these characters as opposed to feeling any kind of empathy or loss for them. I'm sure it's when I go see a movie or read a book, I know it's pretend. So it's not like I'm broken up over the characters as I would be, of course, about the death of somebody I knew. But there's still, I think, that you can train people, without even meaning to, you can train your audience to be numb to loss and to numb to loss of life, at least on some level, if you don't make it important that characters in your story die. You don't give them their dignity before they go. So let's talk about some ways to do it. One of the ways is to write from an immersive point of view. So you want to be writing from the point of view of the character who's going to die. This could be a character who has been in the story for a while, but it could just be the next victim who shows up maybe for only a few pages before, whatever the big bad is gets them. So you want to use, filter through the character's perceptions, the 5 senses, their thoughts, their feelings, any kind of memory connections they might be having during a scene, any kind of imaginative psychological impressions, like things they imagine. If they hear a sound and they think it sounds like claws scraping on concrete, it may not be. In a horror novel, it could very well be, but it might not be. If you stay in the moment and stay with those characters and what they are experiencing, it'll go a long way to creating empathy and creating suspense and make the characters meaningful. You want to focus on the character's experience during death scenes, not the killer's, whether it's a human killer or a force or whatever. For one thing, keeping the out of the point of view, excuse me, of the force helps to keep it more mysterious, keep it more separate, makes it more unknown, more of a threat. Getting into the character's point of view, staying with them, it's about their experience, their fear, their loss. We're with them when they go. In a real sense, they don't die alone. Even if they're alone in the scene, we're there. So have the character, however minor, be dealing with something outside the story's threat. Unless this is a main character who's been battling the big bad for a while, They got something going on in their lives. They've got job stuff. They've got personal stuff. They've got family stuff. Just things they were in the middle of doing before something really bad started to happen to them. Things that maybe they would be emotionally preoccupied with. And especially when it gets toward the point where they're going to die, they're going to think about, what will they miss? What won't they be able to do? Who are they going to let down? And that's really important too, by getting, what else is the character connected to? Even if your character is fighting the big bad, if they know that they've left their kid with grandma and grandpa to watch while they're dealing with the big bad, and as they die, they know they'll never see their child again. That's much more than just the loss of somebody's life. They don't just fall over like a video game character. And it really does create a lot of more sympathy or empathy on the part of the reader. And have the character in the middle of doing something when the attack occurs. Just don't have them standing around or walking by an alley and something jumps out of the alley and tries to eat them. They're usually in the process of doing something else when something occurs. So, your character might be driving to a job interview and suddenly something bad happens to them. They might be just taking groceries to the car. You see this a lot in like serial killer movies where like the serial killer grabs somebody, as they're getting ready to get into their car or something. Having them in the process of something means that this force, whatever the big bad is intruded into their life. And that's the way it usually is with people, when we have real life traumas. We're driving along and suddenly somebody hits us. We're feeling okay and suddenly we get a terrible pain, go to the doctor, and we're diagnosed with cancer. The things that just come out of nowhere. And so unless your character is part of a plot and they're tracking the monster or whatever, you should have them doing something else. And even if they're tracking the monster, they can just be distracted. How many times in a horror movie have you seen the birds fly, or there's a cat, and they're distracted by this, and then they're relieved for a minute, oh, it wasn't the monster, then the monster comes and gets them. Don't do the cliche things, but the fact that they're involved with something else, become involved, even for a moment or two, as they're tracking a monster. That's good. Sometimes in movies, there'll be interpersonal conflict between two people, as they're tracking something or trying to find out the secret, whatever it is. And that can happen. And in that case, when they die, they might not just be thinking, if they're involved with a plot, they might not just be thinking about what they'll leave behind in general, but they may be failing to stop the monster, the threat, the big bad, and prevent it from hurting other people, killing them, taking them over, whatever it's going to do. They may be thinking about their friends, their companions that they've been working with, if any, to go up against this thing. They're going to let them down. Maybe this person has figured something out about the monster that would be useful. When I say monster, I just mean big bad, whatever kind of threat it is. Something useful to stop it, except now they're going to die and not be able to communicate it. And so they're going to really feel like they're letting their friends down, along with dying. So you also want to give different characters different fear responses. If every one of your characters who dies at the hands of the big bad has the same exact responses, the scene, not only are they boring, but there's no empathy because we start to become numb. It's the same thing over and over again. So is the character afraid of physical pain? Like I mentioned before, leaving a loved one behind. Not being able to stop the threat, like I said, and prevent further killings, like I said a minute ago. Responsibility they won't be able to fulfill. When my kids were little, I used to think about, they're grown now, but I used to think about if I died, I wouldn't be there to be their father. That responsibility I could not fulfill if I died. It's a horror writer's mind, always thinking of the worst case scenario. What if they fear actually seeing, looking upon the face of horror, whatever that may be? That's a big thing in Lovecraft stories. It's like, oh no, I'll see the horrible, horrible thing and lose my sanity. But just confronting, the confrontation with the evil and the darkness can be something that they're really afraid of. And remember that during a traumatic event, such as being, attacked and maybe killed by something awful, during traumatic events, people have weird thoughts that come out of nowhere. That's just very human. For example, when I was 9, I almost drowned in a lake. And I was second grade, third grade, around in there, and I had just gotten glasses. And I was afraid that I would lose my glasses in the lake, and my parents would be mad at me. Like, that's the biggest thing they'd think about, if at all. They never think that, if I died. But it was just a crazy thought that popped into my head. And things like that happen all the time with traumatic events. So you could draw on your own life or somebody else or just make it up. But that will seem really human to people. And your character can even wonder, why the hell are they thinking this thing right now? Sometimes you can have your character stand in for the audience and have thoughts like that. And the audiences are like, okay, they're covering the thing I just thought, so it's cool. The audiences will be willing to follow you if you kind of acknowledge in a story something that's weird or strange or just out of the ordinary for the genre, for the scene. What's the character's last thought, reaction, experience, if any, as death claims them? Is it a release? Is it agony? Is it going to take them a long time to die? They thought they were going to die fast, and they're not, and it's awful. Is it peaceful? If you're writing a story where there are acknowledged spirits, ghosts and things, is there anybody to welcome them? Anybody who died before them in the story that might be there to welcome them? Whatever. It could be anything. But if you have the different characters have different last thoughts, different last reactions, that can go a long way to making them seem more like individuals and giving them more dignity, creating more empathy on the part of the reader. Don't revel in a character's death. You don't want to make it so exciting and fun or funny, unless you're writing humor, that people they laugh or they cheer when somebody's getting destroyed. I mean, certain kinds of slasher movies are like that, and you can debate the good or the bad of any of that. But in fiction, that doesn't work because we don't have the visuals. The visuals can do a lot to tell us whether we're supposed to believe this or not. It's why blood in movies is so red, and why jet so far, and they try to make things look fake so it's not as traumatic to watch a horrible like mutilation or whatever. Go watch the first half hour or so of Saving Private Ryan, where they tried to make all those injuries look real. Really, really disturbing. So try not to revel in the character's death. Even if your character's only in the story for a few pages, their loss should be a loss. In the end, remember, as I always keep saying, horror stories are about people, not monsters. Even something like Thomas Ligoti's stories, which focuses on sort of alienation of an everyman type character, it still focuses on the reaction of readers to these things. So they're still about the people. They're about the readers' reactions. So your story's about your characters. Your big bad could be anything. You can switch it out with as many big bads as you want. But the only thing that's going to make it effective is seeing characters' reactions to it, and especially when they die. All right, so that's it. I hope that's helpful. Send me an email if you want. Give me some ideas or leave it in the comments. If you have anything you want me to cover in future videos, like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I'll see you next time. Bye now.